We're recapping what we learned at the Giants OTAs, plus we're spinning ahead and taking a look at the upcoming mandatory minicamp. Joining me is going to be special guest Ed Valentine, A Big Blue View. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast, brought to you in part by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. Patricia Traina here with you. Thank you so much, everybody, for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We appreciate you as always, and welcome to a new week. It is the final week of the Giants spring football practices. This week, mandatory minicamp on deck, starting Tuesday, running Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we will be bringing you coverage of that, of course, all week long. But with the OTAs having completed and us having had a chance to kind of get a feel for what the Giants are doing, I have brought back a familiar face, Ed Valentine, A Big Blue View. And we're going to talk a little bit about the OTAs, what we learned, what we still want to learn, and kind of spin ahead to a preview of what we are looking for in terms of the minicamp. So first, Edward, thank you as always for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Patty. You know, I just hope that people aren't here for my face.
Well, they're not here for my face.
All right. I hope they're here for what we have to say.
I'm sure it's a combination of both, Ed. I mean, come on, people always ask for you, man. They're like,
all
when are you bringing Ed back on? I'm like, so apparently they like you better than they like me.
I don't know about that, Patty. I think maybe they like the fact that I'm one of the few people who's actually willing to give you a little bit of grief and then take what I get in return. Because it always comes back.
Yes, it does. And you know, when I come back at you, it's twice as hard as what you come at me. But
of course,
it's all good, folks. It's all good. It's all good and fun. So, all right, Edward, let's talk about what we've learned from OTAs. Now, you know, to preface this, obviously, no contact, no pads. We're not going to be able to say, oh, this player looked really good. This player didn't. You know, we can't make evaluations, obviously. But what we can talk about, I think, is how the coaching staff is approaching this, you know, some of the concepts we have seen during the team drills. So let's start off, though, with the big picture and your takeaways from what you saw with how the practices were structured and just basically run.
Well, I like the fact that, you know, the practice structure, like what we saw Thursday, they ran a short practice, but they went right into 11-on-11 drills. There's a lot of 11-on-11, Patty. That's one thing that I've noticed is there's an awful lot of 11-on-11. The other day, there were more first team reps for Daniel Jones and company than I thought we might see. To be honest, I think that's been the case all the way through the practices we've seen. Is I think there have been more, you know, generally this time of year, everybody splits equal reps and things like that. And I think one thing I've noticed is, you know, Daniel Jones and that first group are getting a heavy amount of reps, which I think is great considering that the Giants are implementing a new offense, trying to meld together, you know, what Brian Daboll, you know, brings and what Mike Kafka brings. So that's one thing that I've noticed. I thought there's been a lot of good energy, you know, Brian Daboll making his way around the field, you know, and getting to all of the groups. So far, so good as far as what I've seen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, energy and you're right. You know, it's been a teaching camp. You know, I asked Daboll about that last week. And I said, at what point do you merge evaluation with teaching? And he says, look, all this spring is all about teaching, getting the players up to speed, you know, showing them what is expected of them. And also for the coaches, getting to learn about the players what they can do and what they can't do, because, the scouting reports are great, but you have to see for yourself what the players are capable of doing.
One thing that I need to caution people who are reading your reports, my reports, the reports on the days that media hasn't been there, the reports from Giants.com, and, it'll say, oh, Daniel Jones threw an interception. And I think we need to caution people, that Brian Daboll has been clear that he doesn't necessarily care. He wants Daniel Jones to try to fit some balls into tight windows right now, to throw some balls that maybe he wouldn't ordinarily throw in a game setting, to find out what he can do, to find out what his guys can do, to find out who can make a play for him and who can't, and maybe find out, well, geez, I can fit that ball in that window. So it's very difficult to judge, for the most part, and say, oh, he threw a really bad ball. Well, maybe he knew he was throwing a bad ball, but he wants to see how his receiver reacts to him. There was a ball the other day that he threw on a quick out that Adoree Jackson dropped. Would have been an easy pick six. Now, that was a bad ball, but some of the balls we've seen him throw in crowds, I'm not going to criticize him for, because I don't know if that's Jones just saying, well, coach wants me to see what happens here, because that's what time of year it is try things, move guys around, see what'll happen, see what works and what doesn't.
Exactly. And, to that point, Daboll, I think, is trying to rebuild any confidence that Daniel Jones lost, because it was clear sometimes to me, the last year or so, that he was so messed up from getting hit, from what he was seeing. This is a good way, I think, to rebuild his confidence and say, hey, Daniel, it's okay if you make a mistake in practice. At least we know now not to carry it over to the game.
Well, if we see the rookie version of Jones in 2022, I think that's a big step forward. I think you can make an argument, which I think is what you're alluding to, Patty, that because of the fumbles as a rookie, because of the mistakes, because of the dysfunction around the offense, that I think the priority for Jones and the priority for everyone the last couple of years was, we don't care how many points you score. We don't care, just don't turn the ball over. Just don't make a mistake. Mm. And while you don't want fumbles, you don't want interceptions, you don't get big plays if you're not, willing to throw a 50-50 ball or willing to cut the ball loose down the field sometimes. And I think you're right. I think Daboll is trying to put that element back in Jones's game.
Yeah. Because you can't play scared out there. You've got
he's a good deep ball thrower, Patty. Yeah. He doesn't have Josh Allen's, howitzer. Yeah. But he's a good deep ball thrower. Mm-hmm. We saw that, I think in the second OTA that we had access to, a deep ball that he threw to Wan'Dale Robinson for a touchdown. Mm-hmm. And he's a good deep ball thrower, and you want to take advantage of it. You want him to play quarterback.
Yeah. And not play scared,
right?
Which, I think they put the chains on him, if you will, the last year or so, and didn't really do this guy any favors. But let's talk about the offense, Ed. Now, obviously they've been putting in installs. We've seen 3 OTAs, so little bits and pieces we can take away from. What's been your biggest impression about how this offense is going to look different from what we have seen maybe in the past?
Well, for the last 2 years, the Giants, ran a very conservative, very traditional, NFL type of an offense with Joe Judge, Jason Garrett, Freddie Kitchens. This offense it's not necessarily Buffalo's offense. It's not necessarily Kansas City's offense, but this offense, it's really obvious that this offense is going to be a pass first, RPO, play action, spread the field, throw the ball to the running backs kind of an offense. I mean, we saw a formation the other day with Darius Slayton lined up at running back, Saquon Barkley lined up out wide, and it almost looked like Wan'Dale Robinson was lined up as a pseudo tight end. And, and the play ended with a pass to Barkley. But so we're going to see spread the field, quick passing game, a lot of RPO stuff, which is a lot of what we saw, from Buffalo and from Kansas City. So that's a big change.
Mm. And another big change is getting Saquon Barkley out in space more, which is what everybody's been calling for since he basically got here.
Well, obviously, Patty, this is a time of year when even when they're lined up 11 on 11, they're in shorts, they're in T-shirts, they're not even in shells. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see a whole lot of hand the ball off and run the ball between the tackles. But it is brutally obvious that Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka recognize that Saquon Barkley is a weapon as a receiver. We've seen him lined up, we've seen him lined up in the slot. We've seen him lined up out wide. We've seen the Giants throw wheel routes and swing routes to him out of the backfield. It's really obvious that is going to be, a major emphasis. And that's, to me, that's a better way to get the ball to Barkley anyway, because he's a guy, and I know it drives you crazy. It drives me crazy. We talked about it the other day. I hate watching Saquon Barkley run up the middle because I hate watching a 233-pound man with his talent tiptoe and look for space and try to get out of there. That's the one thing he doesn't want to do, is run the ball between the tackles and lower his shoulder and bang into 310-pound defensive tackles and try to push piles. He wants to be out in space. He wants to be in one-on-one matchups where he can try to make guys miss. And I think throwing the football to him is a great way to do that. And by the way, we talked about not evaluating players, but just an impression, Saquon Barkley looks great. He looks really, really good. He looks more explosive, than we've seen in a couple of years. Now, I'm not going to sit here and promise that the Saquon Barkley of his rookie year is back, because I just don't know, after all the leg injuries that he's had. I don't know that guy still exists, but there is a noticeable difference when the Giants put the ball in his hands to when it's in the hands of other guys at this point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And he looks quick. He looks fresh. This was the first offseason in a while he's been able to train and not have to mix training with rehab. And I think he spoke about that earlier in the spring, and just, everybody's like, well, he says the same thing every year, but, this time you could see it. And, you speak about, and you talk, we talk about restoring Daniel Jones's confidence, even though the players won't admit it. You got to wonder if maybe Saquon lost a little bit of confidence with what he was being asked to do and not being able to do it to the best of his ability, because, it's not a fit for what he does.
It's funny, Patty, you talk about that. And I think about a late season game last year with Barkley. And there's a photo that we actually used at Big Blue View, and we might have used it more than once. It might have been a game against Washington where he got out into space a little bit, and he got in a one-on-one situation. And there was a point in Saquon Barkley's career where one-on-one situations with defenders were a complete and total mismatch. And this happened to be a situation where Barkley got tripped up. And the photo just has him sitting on the ground, and he's basically pounding the ball on the ground like, that's not supposed to happen to me. That's not one-on-one. I'm supposed to win that matchup. Yeah. And he just looks like a guy who is primed to be able to win those matchups more often once again.
Yeah. I mean, I think this offense is built to give him a lot of success. I mean, if it doesn't happen, then it's either because of an injury or just
right.
Daboll and Kafka totally miscalculated. You mentioned that the offense isn't quite the Kansas City version. It's not quite the Buffalo version. When I look at it, I see a lot of Buffalo with a sprinkling of Kansas City, like certain maybe throws that they asked Daniel Jones to do, or certain, once in a while you see a play and you say, oh, wow, that reminds me of Kansas City. Do you think right now, based on what we've seen, and granted, we've only seen a little part of it, but does it have more of that Buffalo flavor, do you think?
I think so, Patty, but again, it's so hard to tell. Brian Daboll is the head coach, and I think that is probably where the offense starts, with Brian Daboll's playbook. And, Mike Kafka is going to bring his wrinkles, his innovations, hey, we did this with Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman. Maybe we can do it here with Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson. So I do think there's going to be a heavy Buffalo influence. The one thing I don't want to see, Patty, the one thing I do not want to see, and we've seen it a couple times, and I don't, and I know that at this time of year you try stuff. I do not want to see Daniel Jones trying to run power up the middle between the tackles. Daniel Jones is not, he's not as big and strong as Josh Allen. And you want to let him, turn the corner and run once in a while on an RPO or a zone read or whatever. But running power with Daniel Jones, which we've seen a few times, as I said, running power is going to be a mistake, because you run power with Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor is going to be playing quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Daniel just doesn't know when to quit.
He doesn't know when to quit. And he's as big and strong as he is, he's not nearly as big and strong to take those hits as Josh Allen is. He's just not.
And I don't, on those plays, I mean, obviously there's no hitting and no contact, but, you question if he's learned how to protect himself out there.
No, he's going to put his head down or lower his shoulder and try to pick up 2 more yards.
Exactly.
And that I just don't want to see.
Yeah, I don't either. He's hardwired that way. And, like you said, if he keeps doing that, Tyrod Taylor is going to be in there. Tyrod Taylor hasn't looked all that bad, by the way, but still you want to see what Daniel has, because this is a make or break year for him. All right. And before we move to the defense, I got to ask you about 2 more players on the offense that I think have kind of jumped out a little bit. Daniel Bellinger at tight end and Wan'Dale Robinson.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Patty. And again, you and I talked briefly about this the other day. I'll start with Bellinger. Giants fans lived through never knowing what was going to happen with Evan Ingram for 5 years. Ingram, all kinds of speed, all kinds of playmaking ability, but Giants fans know, how many balls he dropped and how often catchable balls slid through his fingers. Daniel Bellinger is not going to catch every single pass thrown to him throughout his NFL career. He's going to drop a ball every once in a while, but this kid catches the football. You throw him the ball underneath, you throw him the ball in the middle. He's a reliable receiver. He may not be, a tremendous vertical threat, although I've seen him get down the seam once or twice, in OTAs. But this kid can line up in line, can get off the line of scrimmage, and he can catch the football. And I don't know how much more you want from a tight end at this point. Is, if you're looking at just move the chains, catch the football, he's been terrific.
Yeah, he's definitely been one of the superstars of the OTAs, which I know doesn't mean anything, but people ask us how the rookies look and who's looking good. He's definitely been one. Wan'Dale Robinson, I think we're starting to see why the Giants liked him and wanted him so badly.
Absolutely, and we talked about this so much at draft time at Big Blue View. It's like, okay, everybody said, oh, he's a 3rd round pick instead of a 2nd round pick. Well, Joe Shane told us the night they drafted him why they wanted him. He said they had a very clear vision for how they wanted to use this player. And we hadn't seen it at that point in time because we hadn't seen this team on the field. But we talked about the kind of offense that this is going to be. RPOs, quick throws, get the ball out to the playmakers, let them get yards after catch, take deep shots down the field on occasion, when they're there. But a lot of this offense, just like it was in Kansas City and just like what we've seen in Buffalo, a lot of this offense is the quick, short passing game, replacing that, hammer the ball between the tackles in the running game kind of stuff. And that's what Wan'Dale Robinson does. He gives you the gadget kind of stuff. Sure, we've seen some reverses, some jet sweep kind of stuff, but he's one of those guys like Kadarius Toney, put the ball in his hands and let him get some yards for you. And the more we watch this offense, the more I think we see why the Giants drafted him. And I referenced earlier that there was a long pass at one of the OTAs from Jones to Wan'Dale Robinson. And people may have seen the clip on Giants.com. This was a fantastic contested catch by Wan'Dale Robinson with really good coverage from Aaron Robinson on the play, which tells you that, yeah, he's 5'8", but if you give him a chance, and, at 5'8", there's going to be balls that maybe he can't get his hands on, but if he can get his hands on it, he's going to have a chance to catch it, and he'll fight to make that happen. And the more you see of this kid, the more you have to like.
Yeah, I think people are going to be very surprised by this young man. If he stays healthy, you're going to see why he was a second rounder, not a third rounder, which, by the way, when these guys get into the building, I think all that goes out the window anyway. It doesn't matter. You're now a Giant and you have a specific role to, accomplish, and that's that. And it doesn't matter if you were a free agent, undrafted free agent, first round pick, seventh round pick, whatever. So that all is going to go away. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, if you're looking for that special gift but can't decide, or maybe you're ready to pop the question to that special someone, BlueNile.com has you covered. BlueNile.com has jewelry experts on hand 24/7 via phone or chat to help you find a gift within your budget range. Or if you're feeling very creative, use Blue Nile's online tools to create the perfect one-of-a-kind diamond ring. Whatever your occasion, make your moments sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more with the code Locked On. Put your faith in Blue Nile and know that every order is fully insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packagings that won't give away the contents. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today and remember that promo code Locked On for $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, there's only one place to find what you need quickly for your car or truck, and that's at rockauto.com. Rock Auto has over 20 years of offering competitive pricing on thousands of parts for every make, model, and manufacturer. Check out their extensive online inventory, and don't forget to write down Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. Rock Auto, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car or truck will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, Ed, let's talk now about the defense. And before I get in deep into the defense, I want to talk about the injuries for a second, because obviously this week Kayvon Thibodeaux's injury came up with some concern about whether he's going to be available for the minicamp. And if not the minicamp, will he be available for training camp? So he was brought up as well as Andrew Thomas, who's recovering from ankle surgery. So Andrew Thomas, I think, will be fine. But the mystery right now is over Thibodeaux's injury, which is a lower body injury. That I think we know. And, I was watching him at practice, running sprints and doing agility drills. Looked okay to me. What I didn't see, and I think maybe what they're waiting on, is the explosive burst. I didn't see a whole lot of that. What are your thoughts on that injury? And is it a big deal for people to panic at this point, or is it just, calm down? It's only, June, early June. So let's not worry about it.
It's the first week of June, Patty. It's the first week of June. The season opens on September 11th. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that, we saw Thibodeau out on the field. We saw him doing agility drills. We saw him running sprints, and maybe those sprints weren't at, 100%. We didn't see him, doing 3-cone drills, but we did see him doing agility drills. We did see him running. To me, that tells me that whatever that injury is, can't be that bad, and he can't be that far off. If he's out there doing those kinds of things. I had to laugh. I mean, Brian Daboll is a rookie head coach, but Brian Daboll has got the whole deflect the question and don't give anybody any information. He's got that whole gig down. I mean, he was asked about Thibodeau, and of course, teams don't have to give injury information, and he didn't. He's like, well, I don't expect to see him today.
Yeah.
A lot of things can happen over the weekend. He might be there for minicamp. He might be there for training camp. We'll just see, and I'm like, and of course the fan base reads that and they're like, oh my God, he might not even be ready for training camp. And, we drafted another injury prone player, and give me a break. It's the first week of June.
Fans are conditioned, though. I mean, this team has been one of the most injured teams in the league, not just one year. This has been several years. There's been an injury problem. Nobody can seem to solve this issue. So I can understand the fans' concern because, I hate to say it, they've been conditioned to expect the worst.
Yeah, I get that, Patty. But, when I would be concerned is if we get to the end of July and guys like Thibodeau and guys like Andrew Thomas are standing on the sidelines and watching practice when training camp opens. Mm-hmm. That's when I would say, there's something to watch here. Right now, I'm not that worried about it.
I'll take it a step further and I'll say, I don't care if they're sitting there on the sideline during the acclimation period. I want them ready for when the pads go on. Because, the acclimation period, there's no contact, right. There's no pads anyway. So if they need an extra day or two or whatever, and I think this year it's a 5-day acclimation period, if I'm not mistaken. Sure. So Patty, I would, yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so I don't think I would be that concerned if they're limited. I would want them at full strength for when the pads go on, because that's when it's going to matter.
Right. It did bother me a little bit, if I can back up to Andrew Thomas for just a second. We saw Andrew Thomas during voluntary minicamp out on the field running team drills. We saw Andrew Thomas the first 2 OTAs that we saw out on the field, during the team periods. And he's still limping a little bit. There's, that's clear. But it bothered me a little bit. And maybe it was just a rest day because they have gone through other OTAs and it wasn't their first practice of the week. But it bothered me a little bit on Thursday that Andrew did not participate in any of the team periods of practice. That bothered me just a little because you hope to see guys progress, like Shane Lemieux and Dexter Lawrence have progressed out of the red jerseys. And to me, that's the least amount of work we've seen Andrew do. And that bothered me just a little bit. I mean, just something that I want to keep an eye on when we get to practices this week.
It could, like you said, it could have been a load management type of deal, but so that's going to be interesting to see how Daboll approaches that. I know coaches in the past have done that, where they've dialed back on guys, given them a rest if they've taken a heavy load. I guess they rely on the GPS data, but certainly a question I think needs to be asked is how Daboll's going to approach that. Are you going to rely on load management, or is it just go out there and just do what you got to do? Because, in a football game, you're going to sometimes play 40 snaps. You're going to sometimes play 60 snaps. And, you can't really predict what your load's going to be. So you would think you'd want to be up and running and whatnot. But anyway, let's talk about the defense. Wink Martindale talked about being aggressive. The term bully came to mind. Watching the defense during the OTAs, some creative stuff, I thought, especially up front in the front seven. What were your thoughts on what you saw so far from the defense?
Well, we see a lot of drills, Patty, where you see the front seven guys working together and what they're working on. And I don't remember actually seeing this with Patrick Graham and other defensive coordinators, but we see a lot of the individual drill period where these guys are actually working on stunts and working on where they go, working on their footwork, working on their timing. Wink Martindale's going to be more aggressive than what we've seen in a long time. I mean, going back to Steve Spagnuolo was aggressive at times, but Steve's aggression was, let's get the 4 best pass rushers we have on the field, turn them loose. The NASCAR package with 4 defensive ends and maybe sending a 5th guy. This is going to be a kind of defense that we're not used to seeing here with the Giants with the creative blitz packages. And, I loved Patrick Graham. I think Patrick Graham's a great defensive coordinator. I think he's really, really good at what he does. But he is more of maybe conservative. He's more of a sit back, use coverage, try to confuse the quarterback in that way and try to get him to make a mistake in that way. Wink Martindale is just throw caution to the wind and just harass the guy into a mistake kind of a defensive coordinator. And one of the big things that impresses me, Patty, is defensive guys are aggressive by nature. They want to attack. They want to go get the ball. They want to go get the quarterback. And one of the things that I think you have to love is how excited these guys are. We talked to Xavier McKinney, and he says, this defense is he said, there's so much aggression, and I talked to Justin Ellis, defensive tackle who played for Wink the last 3 years in Baltimore. I talked to Justin the other day, and he said, the great thing about playing this defense is from week to week, you never know what we're going to do. You never know how we're going to attack. You never know what blitz packages are going to be in the game plan. You just never know, what we're going to come up with. And I think, we saw Kayvon Thibodeau with a huge smile on his face, a few weeks ago when he was asked about being turned loose by Wink. And that's the impression that I have, is just how excited these guys are about seeing where this defense goes.
Yeah. And they're not alone. And I'll tell you what, one of the battles of training camp I'm kind of looking forward to watching is the defensive front versus the offensive line. The offensive line, I know we're on defense here, but they're trying to build a bully up as well. So can you just imagine the battles those guys are going to have?
Patty, I don't want to see any, I don't know, man. I don't want to see John Feliciano and Dexter Lawrence throwing punches. I just don't. But yeah, I get it. There's, the Giants are absolutely trying to build, a bit of a bully on both sides of the ball. Brian Daboll and offensive line coach Bobby Johnson have been clear, about the kind of players that they want on the offensive line. I mean, Bobby Johnson affectionately calls him a dirtbag. And he wants guys to play to the edge of the rules, do what they have to do. And, and that's the kind of defense the Giants are building as well, is attack. And as a fan, you have to love that too. I know the players are excited about it.
All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, BetOnline.net is the only place that offers the best information on the latest odds, contests, and player props for all your sports betting needs. No matter what sport you're into, BetOnline.net has you covered. Plus, they offer everything you need to know for live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head on over to BetOnline.net today to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Ed, now spinning ahead to the upcoming minicamp, what are you going to be looking for out of these next, 3 days or what? Yeah, 3 days it's going to be.
Well, part of it, Patty, is just the development of the offense. We've seen some of the patterns in the offense. We've seen, but like the other day we saw as much as Daniel Jones and Wan'Dale Robinson have been developing, a chemistry and a relationship. On last Thursday, we saw some really good plays, and we saw 3 or 4 plays where Daniel sort of airmailed Wan'Dale a few times. And for me, I think what you want to see is I want to see a little bit more consistency develop. I want to, there was a wheel route that Saquon ran where Daniel basically hit him in the ankles. He was wide open, and you want to see more of those balls start to get completed. And I'm not gonna panic. I'm not gonna Jones bash at this point because they're still learning a new system. They're running plays they haven't run before. Throwing the ball to guys he hasn't thrown the ball to before. But for me, I want to continue to see the development of this offense, and I want to see more of those plays connect.
Yeah, I want to see the tempo because obviously you want to get to the point where they're playing at an up tempo. You don't want them out there thinking as opposed to just going out there and doing what needs to be done. Because if they start thinking, that means they're playing slow. And it is a new system. They're still learning it, as you said. But I would think at some point, take all the stuff they've learned to this point and just be able to go on autopilot, so to speak. And then any additional installations that might be coming in training camp, again, the process, take a couple of days to learn it and then boom, get on autopilot.
And I think maybe in some ways we're talking about the same thing, Patty, because some of those airmailed balls, or balls that might be thrown in spots, where Jones might think the receiver is supposed to be, and he's not. Some of that might be because it's a new scheme, it's a new offense, it's new route combinations, things like that. So, those are the kinds of things that, that's what this time of the year is for. So
yep,
I'm not going to freak out every time there's a miscommunication between a receiver and a quarterback at this time of the year. You freak out week 4 when it leads to a pick 6 that costs you a game, because that's when it shouldn't happen.
Exactly. And then of course the other thing is, people ask about the injuries again. Right now, I'm not as concerned about the injuries. I think, if I had to take a guess, I would question if Nick Gates is going to be ready for training camp. And Dable said that, he might not, but Gates is working his tail off to get back. And then I'm trying to think, Matt Parrott was the other one. I think that they're not sure if he's going to be ready. And then we'll see if Sterling Shepard is ready to go. But right now, I would say from the injury perspective, there's not a whole lot that you could sit here and say, oh my God, this guy, I don't know if he's going to make it or not.
Yeah, it's been interesting because a lot of the wide receivers, have been sidelined. Kadarius Toney has been sidelined because of his offseason, arthroscopic knee surgery. Yeah. Shepard's been sidelined. Kenny Golladay hasn't been working. I'm really interested, and it's more of a training camp battle, but I'm really interested to see out of the plethora of guys that the Giants have at wide receiver behind that group. I'm really interested to see who emerges. And right now you can look at it and say, guys like Darius Slayton and guys like CJ Board and guys like Robert Foster and David Sills and a lot of those guys are getting a lot of balls thrown at them right now.
Yeah.
So they're getting an opportunity to show this coaching staff that they can be part of this team.
Yeah. And to your point, the fact that Toney and Golladay and Shepard, those are your 3 main guys, and do you sit there and, I guess, remember Daniel didn't have them all of last season. They were in and out of the lineup, and, is that cause for concern with this offense not being able to build up that chemistry again? I don't know.
Well, I don't know either, Patty, but I think that what you want, the biggest problem was, even once they got to training camp, these guys just weren't, not only were they not in games, but these guys weren't consistently on the practice field. And, people want to downplay that, but, Kenny Golladay is a really honest guy. Mm-hmm. He's not eloquent in the sense that he'll give you long-winded Logan Ryan type answers, but he'll tell you the truth. And he, at the beginning of last year, he said, hey, I've hardly practiced with Daniel Jones. It's going to take us a while. It's going to be a slow start for this offense. And it was. Mm-hmm. And even at the end of the year, he was like, we haven't really had a chance to build up chemistry because we just haven't thrown together that much. It matters. So
sure,
you want to see guys get on the practice field, at least for, even if they're nicked up, at least for the individual parts of practice where they're throwing some routes and doing some drills. And, if they can get on the field for those, that has to benefit the Giants in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, hopefully they get these injuries under control. And I think I'm going to see if I can ask Dable what kind of progress they've made on that. I know I asked him that early on in the system, and he's like, well, we're still looking at it. And, I know injuries, you can't really predict them, but I'm sure there are things that they can do to address the soft tissue injuries. And by the way, you notice they brought back the post-practice stretching, which they had gone away from since, I think, Tom Coughlin.
Right. They had, I just missed the band's call, Patty. I missed the band's call at the end of practice. They're not using the bands. Come on.
Oh, man. I use the bands. I still use resistant bands. It's great.
But, injuries, Patty, injuries are so funny, but because you can't predict them, but it's amazing that it's year after year after year with the same team, because most teams are up and down. Some years are good, some years are bad. There's got to be something, but and I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's because fans want to say, oh, it's Ronnie Barnes' fault, or it's the strength coach's fault, or it's this guy's fault, or whatever. I don't think there's any one thing that's ever to blame, no. But it's something that they have to find a way, and they have to find a way to get these guys on the field.
Well, the good news is if I'm not mistaken, Buffalo was one of the least injured teams the last several years. So Dable coming down from Buffalo, because the practice structure is another thing. I mean, you don't want to run these guys down to the nub, and
no.
Not to single out Joe Judge, but how many times did he run these guys down to the nub?
Yeah, there is that. It's a fine line, and you can say, well, these guys are supposed to be in condition, which they are. They're supposed to come in condition because it's a year-round job now.
Right.
But it's a fine line, and the thing that always has mystified me, Patty, is no matter what you do, load management, follow the GPS, follow all that data. It's a sport. Guys are going to twist. Guys are going to take hits. Guys are going to fall awkwardly. Guys are going to twist their ankle. Guys are going to get a foot stepped on. These things are going to happen, and guys are going to get banged up. What has always bothered me more than the injuries themselves with the Giants, Patty, is go all the way back to McAdoo. How often have we heard, well, this guy's day to day, and he should be back in a couple days, and 4 weeks later he's not practicing. And why can't what bothers me is, why can't the Giants get their injured guys back on the field? Why are injuries that they're telling us are minor, that are day-to-day injuries, why are they taking 4 and 5 weeks to get these guys back on the field?
Minor. They're not
minor. They're not telling us the truth, obviously,
yeah.
but but that's the big thing for me is somehow you've got to get these guys back on the field.
I mean, whatever happened to just observing or just going off of what a guy says, excuse me, they have all this technology to measure workload and stress on the muscles. Whatever just happened to, gosh, I was just out and I ran, 2 miles in the heat. I'm exhausted. So I'm going to rest. I'm going to recover. The good old fashioned way. I mean, maybe they don't, is it that they don't trust these guys? I don't know.
It's funny, Patty, because I'm a Yankee fan. And
my condolences.
If you're a Yankee fan, the argument that always happens with the Yankees is the Yankees have a load management philosophy as well, where they give a lot of their superstar players, a lot of their starting players, they'll give them days off when it would look like they don't need days off. It's like, oh, he's played every day for 2 weeks, so we're just going to give him a day off because we think he should have one. But he's going to get hurt anyway. At some point, he's going to get hurt anyway. So, well, he's one of your best players. Why shouldn't he be playing if he's healthy? He's going to get hurt eventually, and your load management isn't going to stop that.
Yeah.
So why isn't he playing?
Exactly.
So everybody's got a different theory. Everybody's got different science. And what I would love to see, Patty, that I don't think we've ever seen is we've heard coaches and teams refer to the science, but I've never actually seen the science. I've never actually seen the data as to, what can lead to injuries and what can't. I'd love to see it someday.
I mean, I have theories and, sometimes I think guys are too big. I think, one theory I know I've seen is, guys reduce their body fat and the body fat can protect some of the ligaments. I mean, I'm not a sports science major or a doctor or anything like that. So I'm not going to sit here and say, well, that's definitely the thing. But I do know in the past, there's been instances where guys they've been workout warriors. And I'm talking, they go 2-3 times a day. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. You got to let the body, calm down and heal itself up, So
I agree. And I think there's a certain sense of guys train a certain way. They train their bodies. They're so muscled up that awkward movements, they're so muscled up that they get hurt when they end up making an awkward movement, they're more susceptible to getting hurt just because they're so muscled up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see, Edward. It's certainly a question that needs to be asked, and I'll see if I can get it in there some way, shape, or form. But anyway, always glad to have you on the program. I thank you very much for joining me. And Giant fans, I should be on, I think I will be on Ed's program later in the week if you want to check in.
Long as you're nice to me at Minicamp.
I am always nice to you. Oh my gosh. You're not always nice to me.
Oh, I don't know about that. Somebody's got to give you grief.
Oh, that's true. And hello, somebody, right? All right. So anyway, thank you for joining me on today's podcast. And Giant fans, make sure you check out Big Blue View Radio. I'm going to be on with Ed after the mini camp. We'll have our wrap up thoughts and just talk, final thoughts before we head into the nice not long enough, but long break. So that's coming up. And also keep it here on the LockedOn Giants podcast. We'll have Twitter Tuesday tomorrow. So you know what to do. Get your questions in. Mini camp coverage is going to be all this week, like I said. And then at some point, we're going to go to our summer schedule where we'll be 3 shows a week. That'll probably be starting next week. So still a lot to come. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Don't forget to hit and subscribe to the LockedOn Giants podcast YouTube channel. And until tomorrow, everybody, have a great one.